Well, greetings for at least the last time. So just out of curiosity, how many of you have either heard me before or else this is your first time? Yeah, that should be everyone. It was not a trick question. Two of you are sleeping and one of you is wondering who the other one is. We've talked about belonging. We've talked about believing. And today we're going to talk about becoming as the third part. Now, you can belong and not believe. I've seen a lot of people attend church. Sitting in a garage no more makes you an auto mechanic than sitting in church makes you someone who is going to go straight up. So today you'll get multiple chances to start challenging yourself. Do I both believe? Have I decided to belong? And am I ready to become? You have to be the right kind of person, do the right kind of thing, before you truly have all that God has ordained for you. But as we began and I saw worship going on, a lot of you are wondering, why people like me sit during some part of the worship. When you're singing Blessed Assurance, I'm thinking Blessed Insurance. So I've got a few things that my generation thinks when you sing. So give me the old-timers religion. Precious Lord, take my hand and help me up. Just a slower walk with thee. Go tell it on the mountain, but speak up. Nobody knows the trouble I have seeing. Guide me, O great Lord, I've forgotten where I parked the car. It is well with my soul, but my knees hurt. So when I saw the kids worshiping here, jumping up, I thought to myself, if we could capture that innocence, because in that moment, they became the environment. When we said, he picked me up and turned me around, they may not have understood the full gravity of it. They just like spinning. But there was a joy. Happiness depends on happenings. But joy is undiluted, it's unadulterated, it's pure. Fred Smith said, when you have joy, it's adequate. Other people can give you pleasure, but you will never find true happiness until you learn to do something for someone else. So that concept of becoming is the character is now the ability to have pride in the mundane. What is it you do every day? We worship every Sunday. When a question was asked during the time, well, you would have got the question if you came early. I'm glad it's not a session on time management. But the question was asked of many different things that you do, many things that you are, many things that you become. But one of the questions I've always asked people is, what gives you joy? What would you like written on your tombstone? I know some of you are too young to imagine that gruesome day. But now closer to meeting him than singing about meeting him, I can tell you this. You will die. As much as you claim eternity, your earthly life is limited. So in this becoming journey, what do you want said about you? But when I look at kids and I look at their innocence, I just found this about what kids think the New Testament is. Here's what one kid said. When the Old Testament was done, they started the New Testament. Jesus was the star. He was born in a barn in the town of Bethlehem. I wish I'd been born in a barn too, because when my mother says, close the door, were you born in a barn? I could say, as a matter of fact, I was. Jesus argued a lot with the chief priests and the Democrats. That's true. If you live in America, you'll know you would argue with Democrats. He had 12 opossums. Most of them were good, but Judas asparagus was not. He was so bad, they named a really yucky vegetable after him. Jesus healed some people and leopards. Then he preached to the Germans on the Mount. But the chief priests were mad at him and put him on trial. Pilate was too chicken to stick up for him, so he just washed his hands. Jesus died for our sins and came back to life again. He went to heaven, but will come back at the end of the aluminum. We can read about this in the book of the Revolution. I remember another story, since you're having fun, about a young girl who came back from school, Sunday school. And the mom said, "What did they teach you in Sunday school?" She says, "Man, most unbelievable lesson ever." And the mother said, "Well, that's exciting. You've never been this excited." "Oh, you're not going to believe what happened. Apparently there was this old dude named Moses, and he was like some kind of like a Jedi. And apparently he had one of those lightsaber things that, he could point at this really bad dude, and stuff would fall on him like frogs, and all kinds of stuff was happening. And this bad dude was really mad at him, and he says, "What can I get you to do to just leave?" And he says, I got some of my peeps are stuck with you, so they got to come with me." He says, "Well, take him and leave." So he took his lightsaber and he went, and then they came up to this place where there was this river. So he went up on the mountain and he asked, "Do we have any engineers here?" And 3 guys stood up, all were Indian. They said, "I'm an engineer." In fact, the joke in California is now there are only 2 languages you need in California, Telugu and Java. So then he says these engineers were asked to commission to build a pontoon bridge. And using raw materials that were available in rustic settings, somehow these Indian engineers used the ingenuity of the ages, and they built this amazing bridge. And when all of the people crossed over, he stood up again and he says, "Do we have any sharpshooters here?" And then they found again another Indian who keeps winning medals in sharpshooting. And then he picked up his gun and he hit a bolt right in the middle of that bridge, and the bridge fell down and all the bad people died. The mother is aghast. She's saying, "Is that what they're teaching you in Sunday school these days?" He says, "No, but you're not going to believe how they said it really happened." So some of the things we see in the Bible, when Brother Sandeep was talking about the one you want to become close to, healed the lame, he made him walk. Not with grandioseness that we claim. A woman he felt that was afflicted touched the hem of his garment. His mercy is everywhere. It's like when this guy goes to heaven and he's asked, "On what authority do you want to get to heaven?" He says, "Well, the guy, caretaker of heaven, says it's 100 points to get into heaven." I'm going to ask you a series of questions. First question, why do you think you should go in? He said, "Well, I attended church regularly. I tithed every Sunday. I was very faithful in my worship. My children went to Sunday school class. I was a giver. I participated in missions." The guy said 2 points. He says, "Man, at this rate, it's going to take the grace of God to get me in." Ding, 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 ding. Now you can get in 100 points. There is nothing you can do that is good enough that will get you to God. There is nothing you can do that is bad enough that will keep you from Him. The God of all creation stepped into His own creation and stands in the chasm of our casualty, dwells in the valley of our vileness, and says, "I have come for you." Whenever you get an invitation, realize the invitation is not to get up out of your chair and make a profession. That is only because He said, "Unless you publicly profess me, I will not publicly claim you." But your salvation, the very process of becoming after you believe and after you find the body of believing, I picked from 1 Corinthians, but what I'm going to do is, in addition to the scripture, I'm just going to read the scripture before and after. So 1 Corinthians 3:18 will be the one we dissect. But in 3:16 it says, "Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? If anyone destroys God's temple," think about that. You are God's temple and He dwells in you. When you destroy what's within you, you're destroying the living God. God will destroy him, for God's temple is holy and you are that temple. Then the scripture we'll look at, "Let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you think he is wise in this age," remember, knowledge is learned, wisdom is lived. We got more knowledge right now than at any other time in human history. Largest percentage of educated derelicts messing up the planet. Everybody has a degree. None of them have an education. Isn't that fascinating? For the wisdom of this world is folly with God, for it is written, He catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise that are futile. Now here's an interesting thing. He's not knocking wisdom, but he's saying, if you think you're wise in this age, get off that high horse and fall down and act like a fool so you can become wise in Him. The wisdom of the ages is not how much you know about the age. It is how much you know about the one who exists outside of time. That relationship that you have on a daily basis. One of the questions that was asked earlier was, how many of you like Mondays? And we kind of laughed about it, we joked about it. Back when I was growing up, there was a song that made the #1 on the last day. It was called Manic Monday. People are petrified of getting back to Monday. But my mentor, Mr. Ziegler, used to just play word games. He says, people are afraid of Monday because they call it the weekend instead of calling it the strong end. Just think about a simple twist of the tongue. You call it the weekend. If you call it the strong end, that's when you rejuvenate yourself with God. I've shared this many times here, and that's the statement. Church has never been a rest stop. A conference has never been a rest stop. It's a refueling stop. Whatever you get, you have to be excited on Monday to go out and give it to the rest of the world. And keep giving till Saturday when you're bone dry, drop dead, empty. And you come back in here gasping for air saying, Pastor, fill me up again. A refueling stop. Now, don't put too much stock in the building. Isaiah 54:2 says, increase the place of your tents. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords, strengthen the stakes. Because in the old days, the tabernacles were made of cloth. And anytime it increased, they just increased the size. But that was the phrase that William Carey then came up with, if you attempt great things, you can expect great things. When he first preached the Isaiah 54:2 sermon in Andrew Fuller's church, people got up and left because it was another message. And he said, Brother Fuller, stop them. This is not what I want out of my mess. I want people to realize that I'm serious. Now, I want you to think about that. The world is your tabernacle today. Because if you want to understand the chronology, look at it this way, we get it backwards. We first build the edifices to honor Him. Then we invite the people and we have the trappings within to make them comfortable. Then we sing and worship and give them joy, and then ask them to go out and get redemption. But the Genesis account is quite different. First, the people had to be redeemed. They had to spend 40 years in the wilderness killing off old habits. Someone says a journey that took 11 days took 40 years because they asked guys for directions. Now, I'm married to a sweetheart who gives me directions without any reason. I'll be driving the car and she'll say, can you take a left? I'll say, thank you, princess. I don't know how I managed to go to 75 countries on 6 continents without that bit of advice. I'd be in a field in Zimbabwe somewhere without your genius. But a journey of 11 days took 40 years, one biblical generation. Some of you are not old enough to remember this, but calculate in your own time and you will see great significant milestones in every 40 years of your life. There will be a trajectory because that's a biblical model. First came redemption. The people had to be redeemed out of slavery, and we sang that, I'm not a slave anymore. What does not being a slave anymore? Not just being free. It is being rid of a slave's mentality. It is being rid of the chains. You've all seen the meme and you've passed it around of the elephant that is put in the ground with a peg and a chain for 40 years, and when they take the chain up, it doesn't move. Here's the irony. Even with the chain, it could have moved, but they put it when it was a child. But when it grew up, it could have uprooted that and all of Kerala. Because that's the only place I see them tied up. In fact, my catchphrase is, when I went to Kovalam one time, they said, wait, the most amazing thing is about to happen. And I always marvel, when we take selfies and all that, I'm not a very big picture taker. I take pictures because people ask me to. But I think the reason we call it a selfie is because we're too lazy to call ourselves narcissistic. But I remember I was with my brother and my father celebrating the 40th anniversary, and these guys says, wait, there's something amazing about to happen. And I thought to myself, man, we're on Lake Vembanad, where when you look at creation and you look at the sun setting on the western frontier, you can marvel at the beauty. See, God's entire majesty is based on monotony. Every day he looks at the sun and says, again. Every day he looks at the stars and says, again. And we want variety. Variety is the spice of life. Monotony buys the groceries. So I'm standing in front of Lake Vembanad, and these guys are saying, wait a minute, there's something amazing about to happen. And my brother is saying, please don't say anything, you're going to ruin our family reputation. But I cannot. You guys have known me. I cannot stand stupidity for more than an hour. I just have to correct it, because not for my sake, I just want to prevent someone else the misery of having to deal with these people. The other day on a flight, this lady came on and I looked at her and I said, carry on means you should be able to carry it on without a crane. Overhead means you should be able to lift it over your own head without the help of 3 people. You look like you're going to stunt your growth. What is in this, a Buick engine? Good Lord. So now the spectacle begins. 12 ducks are now marching in a straight line. The ducks have bow ties. And there's a Mallu behind this sequence. My business partner is a Mallu, so I say this. In the old days, all roads led to Rome. Now all businesses belong in a Mallu's home. This guy figured out a crack genius way to entrap humanity in their idyllic boredom. Let me get 12 ducks and make them walk in a line and charge these guys. Before we get on a boat and see God's wonder. Of course, he's got his lungi in half-mast, and he's walking 12 ducks. And people are clapping and taking pictures with ducks. We have put a man on the moon. India at the same time is celebrating a spot on the dark side of the moon, never done before. And this guy is walking, and people are excited. This completes our vacation, sweetheart. We got ducks walking in a line. We truly have become worthy. My brother said, what are you going to tell the people? I said, when I tell the story, I'm going to have a different ending. You find me a guy who can make 12 Mallus walk in a straight line. Now, I'll take a picture of that. Now, I say this tongue-in-cheek because what fascinates me is what we have now called entertainment. What fascinates me is now what we call wonder. Have we ever woken up in the morning and look at the dewdrops? Shashi Tharoor, Keralite, said this, former Undersecretary of Communication of the United Nations, speaking in Colorado Springs at a conference. When does darkness end and light begin? And of course, he wrote a book on Hinduism, so his take is purely philosophical, but his words are just poetry dancing off a page. When does darkness end and light begin? He says, oh, let me tell you a story. There was an Indian mystic who was approached by a foreigner who asked him, when does darkness end and light begin? And the Indian mystic said, oh, that's easy. Either one of my pupils can answer that question. So first he invited the pupil from the northern part of India. And that guy said, oh, Guruji, when the first rays of the morning sun come cascading down the Himalayan plain and the villagers awaken in God's awesome wonder, that's when darkness ends and lights begin. Majestic. The pupil from the southern part of India, not to be outdone, he said, no, when the blue of the Bay of Bengal, the green of the Indian Ocean, the red of the Arabian Sea come together in one cataclysmic moment at the southernmost tip of the Indian peninsula, and you can see the dew on the Palmyra fronds, that's when darkness ends and light begins. Both glorious definitions. But here's what the Guru said. He said, no, when two people meet in a common embrace and say, all our lives, we have dreamt under the same created sun. We have hoped under the same twinkling stars. We have toiled under the guise of the same day. That's when darkness ends and light begins. Your journey of belonging begins When you embrace people without qualification. When you hold them without equivocation. When you bend and ask them their name. Try this sometime in your busy goings and goings when you leave here. Go to a restaurant and before you sit down, ask the person his name. Watch your service change. You'll be the first person to have done it. Servant leadership is bending so low that you never see the face of those you serve, just their feet. But when they look over your bent frame, they see the Jesus who sent you. That's when John 3:16 comes alive. For God so loved the world that whosoever. We can sing about Jerusalem, but the veil will not be lifted over Jerusalem, and our King will not come to rule again until the word has reached all the Gentile world. You and I, my friends, are caretakers of this process. We are torchbearers of this legacy. We belong to a royal lineage, a regal heritage. Our seal and our ambassadorship is because we represent a different country. That's what should give you joy. That's what should give you happiness, not stuff. So in 1 Corinthians 3:18, it says, let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you thinks that he is wise in this age, let him become a fool that he may become wise. So first, let no one deceive himself. This is the discovery. One of the reasons we are facing a backlash is the truth is being now shielded by lies. You say something long enough, you say it often enough, over a period of time, it'll become truth. That's why we call it post-truth. I love how Friedrich Nietzsche, postmodern, the guy, the assassin, or probably the herald for the postmodern revolution, who wrote The Madman of Weimar, God is dead and we have killed him. And all of the Enlightenment philosophers said, maybe there is truth, there is no God. Someone put up Friedrich Nietzsche's sign in one of the buildings of one university. God is dead, Friedrich Nietzsche. Some wise guy put up beneath it, Friedrich Nietzsche is dead, God. See, common sense arguments because we're believing lies. This is what makes my life easy because I challenge them at the basic level of understanding, not anything complex. Two scientists who got together and said, we have now created everything we can in the world in a lab. We can now reach the point where we can create life using abiogenesis research in a lab. We can actually create life in a lab. And the other scientist said, what is the starting point? Is there a raw material? He says, we don't need God, we just need sand. And God said, get your own sand. There's always a starting point. There's always a starting point. But the reason we are in this stage, our discovery, where we are deceiving ourselves is we're jumping into this argument midstream, and as a result, we have our feet firmly planted in midair. Logic 101 clearly states some things are right, some things are wrong. Both things cannot be right in the same relationship with each other. If I'm doing a virtual seminar, I can say I'm live and in person, but not to the same group. That's a fallacy. But we overlook the errors of our time. Why? We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to upset the apple cart. We want to go with the flow. Folks, if you let someone else row your boat, they're going to take it to where they want to go, not to where you want to go. The God of the universe looked at the man and basically said, come. When he took his eyes off God, he started to sink. When you're in despair, as Brother Sandeep said, when today you're feeling the act of betrayal, it's because you're taking your eyes off the only one who understands it. Who can understand betrayal except someone who was betrayed? Who can understand loneliness except someone who was left lonely to die on a cross? Who can understand punishment except someone who took it for you with the lashes? Who can understand abandonment from a mother except someone who went through that? Ask yourself that question. Let no one deceive himself. Here are some of the fallacies that we make. I need to respond to issues with love. I need to realize that other beliefs matter. They do. I cannot be vocal for fear of giving offense. I need to be sensitive. Don't deceive yourself. Father Damien went to Molokai in Hawaii, where all the people who were afflicted with leprosy were relegated. During high tide, ships came in and they dropped supplies on the shore, and people had to stay up. When low tide came and the ships left, only then were these people allowed to come. Father Damien went there because his brother was commissioned to go there, but his brother died, so he took up his brother's call. He arrived in Molokai and began to serve the people afflicted with leprosy. And one day, as he was pouring something hot, the liquid fell on his leg, and he said, "Oh my God, I finally have become one of them. I finally become one of them." It's very easy to go after the passage, "What you have done to the least of these." See, I've done prison ministry. I know what it is like to be on the other side. But when he said to the people, "When I was in prison, when did we come?" No, what you have done to others. It's not that service to him specifically. You need to belong to a life of service. The second mood is, if anyone among you thinks he is wise in this age. That's the discourse. Solomon said, "My people perish for lack of a vision." I want to give you a small formula on Christian becoming. And it's called RATE, R-A-T-E. Every day ask yourself, how reliable are you in your witness? How reliable are you? How adaptable are you? Now, I preached in a multitude of churches, multitudes of services, every different kind, from under a tree in Haiti to people with just sitting on outside a tent in Kenya, with the Maasai tribe doing a foot washing ceremony, to some of the big houses which have 60,000 people. In fact, I've told this joke before, but I remember I went to one church and they had a system. At the 8 o'clock service, they said you have to wear a suit and tie. We have old-timers here. At 9 o'clock, we're a little more relaxed. You can lose the tie, but you have to wear the suit jacket. At 11:30, we have the youth. Brother Ranjit. I come to church dressed. He comes distressed. So it's like, मेरे पास अच्छा trousers है यार. But he's appealing to the crowd. But so I'm standing as an old timer. Look, the pastor looked at me. He says, "You're upset." I said, "I'm praying to God. I'm thankful you don't have a fourth service. I'd be in my socks." Worship is for God. If that does it, that does it. But what happens is, if we put too much structure around that, I think we somehow take away the basic message of what we are trying to communicate. Guess what? If we have to decide on how we dress for church, look at how he was when he allowed the church to begin. The little piece of cloth he had, they cast lots for. You must be lucky they're not playing gambling outside for your clothes. Let him become a fool. The word was used, deliverance. How do you become a fool? The word fool, when you go to the Greek derivative, actually begins with, it ties closely to the word silly. And silly actually comes from the derivative of blessed. So if you look at the etymology of some of these things, when you actually give up the intellect that we so proudly have and come down to the bare structure of innocence, that's when God's glory truly allows itself to. That's why I always say, stop saying, "God, use me." Start saying, "God, make me usable." When you say, "God, make me usable," the carpenter will mold you, the potter will shape you. You know, you need to have that childlike innocence. This little kid goes to his grandparents' house and finds one of those old gigantic Bibles, the old school ones. My mother-in-law had one. We donated it to the Bible Society. I found out how expensive it was, but she wanted to donate it to the Bible Society. I wanted to put it on eBay. It was old one that had been handed down for generations. I've been to the Bible Museum, a friend of mine. I've seen a collection of $13 million worth of old stuff. So one of these old Bibles was there, and this little kid walks in, and he asked his grandfather, "Can I open it?" Grandfather said, "Yeah, it's the Word of God, son. You can open it." The mother said, "Just be careful." So the grandfather said, "No worry, I'll supervise." The little boy opens it, and he's turning the pages, and suddenly a leaf falls out. And he looks at his mother, and he says, "Wow." And his mother said, "What happened?" "This is a really old Bible. I found Adam's underwear." So to think of having that joy, to think of having that mirth, to think of having that simplicity when you look at the Word of God. You know, that's one of the reasons why I try to spread mirth and laughter. Because even though the world is deadly serious, we were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, endowed with the seeds of His greatness. But as Chesterton said, the one thing never mentioned anywhere, which is at the underbelly of all of this, is His mirth, His gaiety, His joy amidst that affliction, His absolute ecstasy amidst our offering, His absolute exaltation when we look at Him and say, I bow to you. When you sing, is it I, Lord? I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I've heard your cry in the night. I will hold your people in the hand. Every time I sing that, tears flow. I've done it. There is nothing more joyous than putting your arm around a little kid in Egypt who will never get out of that place, but who speaks English, so he's assigned to you. There is no joy that when you're in the place of Jamtara and you meet a young man who comes up to you and he's been rescued by a mission in Rajasthan, sold as a child, sex slave as a boy, and rescued by that Christian orphanage and raised up. And now that boy speaks fluent English, and he's a translator for many of the people who come. And there I was in Jamtara, and he looked at me and he said, "Sir, I've been on YouTube. I like your English style." I said, "I'm going to do one better for you. I speak Hindi. Why don't I preach in Hindi and you translate for me in English?" I finally gave him a chance to be who he wanted to be for 4 people. That's when joy... Now someone says, "Do you really speak in Hindi?" I said, "The time I mess up, I just tell them it was tongues." So just, hey, you know. So that he may become wise. So that he may become wise. This is destiny. When will you become wise? Because when we're done, they're going to come back and do some other stuff. They're going to give you invitations. But this is the closing day. Some of you have been on the edge of your seats, ready to leap forward, but you're wondering, is this my moment? Some of you were saying, "I've accepted, but I backslid. Will He still forgive me?" Some of you will say, "I have taken everything that I have required to be considered a child of God, but within the apostasy of the moment, I have hung out with the weak." We had questions on that yesterday. What about my sin? What classifies as sin? Susanna Wesley said, anything that weakens your reason, impairs the tenderness of your conscience, obscures your sense of God, takes away your relish for spiritual things. In short, anything that increases the authority of the body over the mind, that to you is sin, no matter how beautiful it is on of itself. She raised 2 giants of the faith, John and Charles Wesley. Homeschooled them. Was a woman who had so many children, but with great discipline, impacted the world by shaping 2 continents. Her definition of sin is one of the classic of anything that weakens your reason. What is weakening your reason when you go out there? If you leave here without the soul cleansing, blood purging, sacrificial offering of the love of the one on the cross that you exalt in the walls of the church, but refuse to acknowledge outside. When you leave here, you will leave with a little pep in your step because the music will be lilting, the worship, the gathering, the camaraderie. You can feel the Spirit of God. Then you get into the loneliness of a traffic jam and the debate on which biryani is better in Hyderabad, which seems to be the great existential question of our time, and I don't know why. They all taste alike. I know, you're just groaning and moaning. Look at me, I've probably eaten more biryani than you. In fact, I was asked this question by an anthropology professor. He came and said, "Oh, I heard your lecture. You're quite compelling. You've got a good stage presence. Do you really believe in creation versus evolution?" I said, "Well, I'm not a scientist and I'm not a theologian, but I'll split it as a public man." He said, "What?" I said, "I've often wondered when I go to the zoo, which I'm sure you have too, and you've paid money like I have, and you go, for some reason, we like to hang out in front of the monkey cage more than the king of the jungle. Because the monkeys are like us. Apparently, we have ancestry with them. But we don't hang out with the king of the jungle, though that's majestic. But I said, I want to ask you a question as a professor of anthropology. Do you think the monkeys in the cage are having an existential crisis and saying to themselves, I wonder what those guys did to become visitors, and we're still stuck here eating bananas and swinging. Which meeting did we miss? And he looked at me, he says, what's the point? I said, the point is, if you believe in what you believe, how come you've left some of your ancestors behind? Shame on you. Our world should change, and you should not be afraid of what they sling at you. This world is full of stupidity on hyperdrive. The information superhighway has got ignorance making roadkill out of our children. And here we're standing going with the flow. When all groups find you accessible, that's when you've arrived. That's when your wisdom in God comes in. Folks, I've preached in other places of worship. I can show you checks written to my ministry that were given to me by foundations of faith that would kill me if I went into their country. But the guy heard me somewhere and said, if we can put our differences aside, will you come and speak at my son's graduation party? 100% of the audience were people of another faith, a radically different faith, a faith that beheads Christians. And I'm standing there saying, sure, as long as you don't censor me. I have gone into environments some of you will only dream about. When I talk here with authority, I have been into any environment that has all the alphabets attached to it. But I go in with the love of Christ, but I go in with the authority of His wisdom. I'm not going to ease up, let up, shut up, or put up until I'm taken up. In fact, I'm just getting warmed up. That's what I want to become. That's what I want to share as I close. Many of you have heard the story. Some of you, it'll be the first time. But it's probably the most soul-stirring story I ever tell. It's the story of after I had become what I have chosen to become, a follower of the carpenter from Galilee. Standing in Visakhapatnam at my mother's funeral. And my father looking at me and my cousins looking at me, and everybody are mad that I've chosen not to participate. Many of you have friends there. Many of you have cried in your emails to me saying, I am there. I've become a Christian, but I'm dreading the day when my parents pass. When I know I'm going to be confronted with this signature moment. Not getting into the graphics of the story, what I want to let you know is, when you decide to become that faithful follower, when you choose to belong to the flock that He calls redeemed, when you believe, as Pastor prayed, with all your heart and confessed with your tongue that His Lord and He died for you, and if you welcome into your life, you will now live the rest of your life for Him. When you stand at that crossroads, challenged by society, by culture, by tradition, by habit, by hope, by everything that you hold dear, and you're a pariah at your own mother's funeral. The gut-wrenching sobs you cry are not because she passed, but because you can't be near her, the woman you loved. And you're crying out to God, why me? I've been faithful. And my father walks me up to my mother, holding my hand in front of a crowd that is stunned, saying, what is this man going to do? And he whispers in my ear, before we do anything to your Amma in the name of our gods, would you mind praying over her in the name of yours? Then you pray the prayer, Lord, you're the God of Lazarus. You're the God of resurrection. This woman never confessed you in her life, so I don't know where her eternal soul is. I will be lying. This is at a Hindu funeral. But the two I'm holding, my father and my brother, need to know that I'm not doing this for show. Folks, if your Christianese is just that you're a Christian and other people need to see that you go to a nice place on a Sunday and you hang out with people who don't cuss, that's not the gospel. The gospel is walking out and seeing the people on the street. I remember when I spoke in one church, a woman stuck her hand into the car after I preached on giving. I did not know. I was numb at that time after shaking hands. I don't know. I put a big amount of money in her hand because she had leprosy. And I still held on to that stigma. What happens if she touches me? And she stuck her hands into the window, and whatever money I had, I put in, but my hands touched her. And with absolute fright, petrified that I had now contracted something which is curable. I washed my hands all afternoon. And God looked at me and said, there is a miracle in everything I'm doing. And that afternoon, my brother Anish came to me with a story on people afflicted with leprosy. The movie, The Least of These, that my friend Victor Abraham completely bankrolled, and we were able to give money back to the mission home. When I met Gladys in Australia and I asked her, what do you think of our movie? She says, more than that, I'm proud of the fact that you used actual people afflicted with leprosy to show what Graham really loved. Folks, the least of these are truly people you will never see in everyday life. But if you believe, you belong, and you become, the world becomes your mission field. Listen.